أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So there is a question that I would say has been the central question that I've had for over a decade in terms of my own studies and my own work and my own teaching and learning. And that is the question of why do we suffer? The question of suffering is something obviously is not unique to one person. It's a question that a lot of people have asked, and a lot of people have come to many different conclusions and many different answers to that question of suffering. Why do bad things happen to good people? This is a question that theologians and many philosophers have struggled with, and a lot of people have come to conclusions that made them reject God altogether and made them reject religion. So the question of suffering is really an age-old question, right? Why do we suffer? Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did our creator put us on this earth, or even before he put us on this earth? He created us before we came to this earth, right? Because when we're talking about our forefather, our father Adam, and our mother Hawa, he created them both before Dunya, right? Before bringing them to this life. And so the question of, did Allah create us and our father to suffer? Did Allah create us and then put us on this earth to suffer? Is an important question. And different religious sort of philosophies answer this question differently. There are some beliefs that we have to suffer. That suffering is just part of our life on this earth. Then there are other ideologies that kind of say, you know what, YOLO, you only live once, so you should never suffer. You should never feel pain, and you should maximize pleasure. So we're kind of living in a world where there's extremes. There's all sorts of different answers to this question. Where does happiness come from? What is happiness? What gives us happiness? Safety. What is safety, and how do we get safety, right? These are just universal human questions. And so when we look at the different ways in which these philosophies have shaped us, have shaped our parents and our, the older generation, and then now when we're raising our children, it's really, really important that we can answer these fundamental questions. Why am I here? Why was I created? What is my role? What is my role as a woman or a man? What is my role as a wife or a husband? What is my role as a son or a daughter? What is my role as a parent? But also, what is my role as a human being? What is my role as the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And when I do find myself suffering, or I see people around me suffering, why does that happen? That's a very important question. First, I'll look at sort of these two extremes. We have these two extremes. We mentioned the extreme of, yeah, you know what? This life is just a place of suffering. There's a lot of sort of conversation in maybe religious circles, even Muslim circles. And I'm not even talking about Catholicism here, where there is that kind of concept of suffering, but I'm talking about Islam. That there is sometimes a conversation around the idea that, well, you know what? Dunya is a test. We know this, right? And therefore, it's kind of supposed to be bad for the believer. It's a place of suffering for the believer. And you just have to be patient through the suffering. And then when we go to Jannah, then we will finally stop suffering. There's a little bit of that ideology that we sometimes hear. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Where someone is in a bad place, for whatever reason, they're in a bad place. Whether that is because of an abusive environment, whether that is because of injustice, whether that is because of mental health issues, whether that is because of just some oppression. And we sometimes look at that and we say, you know what, just be patient. Just be patient. And when we say that, what does that mean? And how have we used the concept of sabr and abused it? And I think that's one of the most common sort of types of baggage that we inherit, toxic baggage that we inherit from the older generation. And that's this idea that dunya is a place of suffering. So if you are suffering, just swallow and move on. You know, just keep going, keep on drinking the poison and have sabr. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard this theme again and again and again, and in religious circles. It is especially emphasized with women. It is especially taught to women. This idea that a woman is meant to carry suffering. And there's different words depending on the language. I know in my language, it's istahmili. Istahmili means like just, you know, bear it, hold it, you know, to take it. I've heard one woman I met, and she said, my mother told me I should be able to drink poison and keep a smile on my face. Right? And that concept is very, very prevalent. Now, how does that fit into what we understand about the origin and the cause of suffering? And that's why we have to have the proper understanding of what does Allah want from us and why did Allah put us on this earth. First, I'm going to jump to the opposite extreme, the YOLO mindset. You only live once, live it up, you know, do whatever you desire. This is your only chance, so do whatever you want. You know what I mean? It's like you tell a child to, you know, to go into a toy shop and you say to them, this is the only chance you're ever going to have to see a toy. Can you imagine what would happen if you told a child, you will never again see a toy after this day? Anyone know what's going to happen in that shop? And you don't just tell one child that, you tell all the children, and you just send these children into the toy store and you tell them you will never see a toy again. This is your only chance. YOLO. This is basically YOLO, right? You're only going to see this toy store once. What's going to happen inside that store? It's going to be like how Black Friday used to be before the internet or before everything moved online. Before before they made Black Friday for the whole month of November and it was all online, is that people were crazy. People actually acted insane and people died. People actually died. I remember there was a time in Walmart where there was a stampede that killed an employee on Black Friday. There was times when this woman was like just using mace to get the deal before anyone else. Was like a video game or something. The point is that when you tell a human being, when you tell a human being that they only have one chance at something, they will go into a scarcity mentality. And a scarcity mentality is like Hunger Games, right? You gotta destroy everyone else or you don't survive. It's basically jungle law, right? And so when you tell a human being that you only live this once, that dunya is all that there is, you're like that, you become like that child in the, you know, the toy store, just going crazy. And it becomes all about me. It becomes all about serving who? Me. Serving myself. At the expense of others, and also at the expense of right and wrong. Because that child, if they're the only one chance, they're going to be stealing, they're going to be pushing, they're going to be punching, they're going to be doing all sorts of things. And so it's very important to understand these two extremes, because Islam is neither of these two. The Islamic paradigm is neither of these two. The Islamic paradigm does not teach us that we only live once and this is our only chance at getting, happiness and pleasure. We know that this is not our only life. We know this is not our only chance. But at the same time, and this is where many of us end up going wrong, like getting it wrong, is that this life is also not supposed to be a place of suffering. So the way I explain it is not Jannah, but it is not Jahannam either. You guys understand what I'm saying? Meaning, it is not supposed to be perfectly good, but it is also not supposed to be perfectly bad. And that's important, and that might be obvious, but it's important to emphasize, because when we find ourselves in a place of suffering, we have to know that that is not the intent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's intent is not for us to have perpetual suffering. Allah, in fact, tells us in the Quran that He wants ease for us. يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرِ. Right? He wants ease for us. وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرِ. Allah doesn't want difficulty for us. Why? Allah says, because mankind was created weak. Allah created us and He knows our capacity. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not put a burden on us or an obligation or responsibility on us beyond what we can carry. And so Allah does not want difficulty for us, and He does not want us to suffer. So now the question is what? Now I'm assuming in your mind the question is, but why does it feel so hard then? Because the reality is, although it's not supposed to be hellfire and it's not Jannah for sure, but then why does it feel so hard sometimes? And that's the question that is kind of the focal point of pretty much everything I've written and everything I've tried to learn and teach, is then why does it get so hard? Why does it feel so heavy sometimes? Because if Allah did not intend for us to be overwhelmed, why do we get overwhelmed? That's the question.
I have another question too. Like, how do we really judge? Because hard thing can be an easy thing for someone else.
Right. So her question is, how do we judge? Because, well, something that's very hard for me might feel easy for someone else. You're absolutely right. There is a dua that we're taught in which we say, this is one of the best duas for times of difficulty, and that is, Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla. That, oh Allah, nothing is easy except what you have made easy. You see that? Nothing will feel easy unless Allah has made it easy. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla wa anta taj'alul hazna idha shi'ta sahla. And you make what is difficult, if you will, feel easy. So you're absolutely correct, is that the ease or difficulty of something is not intrinsic to that thing. It's actually not, because one life experience can be made easy for one person and it can destroy another person. And it's the same life experience. So the factor is actually the help of Allah. The factor that makes something easy or hard is whether or not we have the help of Allah. Okay, so now going back to why do I feel like I'm drowning when Allah did not put me on this earth to drown? See, we have to, if you think about this dunya, so there's one famous scholar who likened dunya to an ocean. So he said that this dunya is like an ocean and our hearts are like boats. Okay? In order to survive this ocean, we have to make sure that the ocean never enters the boat. You understand this concept? So I wrote a whole chapter about this concept in Reclaim Your Heart. And it's about the fact that if you think about what destroyed the Titanic was the mightiest ship of its time, and it was the quote-unquote unsinkable ship. You guys know this, right? And yet it became the most famous sinking ship. What did that? Does anybody know? Water got in the boat. Iceberg made enough holes in the boat that water got in the boat. That's it. All it took to destroy this unsinkable ship was water got in the boat. And so what this analogy is teaching us is that if we're going to be successful in this dunya, we have to cross this ocean, like to get to the other side. There's no way around it. We got to sail this. But the only way to be successful is you got to make sure that the dunya does not take over the heart. The dunya cannot enter the heart. The dunya has to stay outside of the heart. See that concept? That's the concept of Reclaim Your Heart. It's about getting the heart back. It's about getting the heart back from the dunya that owns it. So when we take it back, we give it to Allah. That's the idea. So we're going to be in the ocean. It's inevitable. But we're not supposed to drown. And so when we find ourselves and we feel as though we're drowning, that's where we have to ask, what's happening? And how and why? And is this the intent? So now, fast forward, that question is what I focused on in Healing the Emptiness, which is, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I am overwhelmed with my difficulties. I feel that I am suffering in one aspect or another. The question now is, how can I stop suffering and why am I suffering? Now, typically, if you go to, I don't know, maybe a doctor, they will answer this question differently than if you maybe go to a psychologist. And maybe they will answer it differently than if you go to a sheikh. And maybe they would answer it differently than if you go to a dietitian. So, or a sociologist. Or an anthropologist. And what I tried to get at in the book is that we cannot answer the question of suffering by only looking at one aspect of the human being. And that's the problem with a lot of our discussions, is it only looks at one aspect of the human being in the question of suffering. So for example, someone is suffering from severe depression, or someone is suffering from severe anxiety, or someone is suffering from panic attacks. Okay? This is a suffering, right? They're suffering. If they go to one person, say a doctor, the doctor might say, you are suffering because you don't have enough serotonin. Here is some medication. And they would be maybe prescribed a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, like an antidepressant. And then that becomes the end of that discussion, right? Now, what has that person just done? That person has looked at the question of suffering only from one very narrow aspect, which is chemical. And the argument that I'm making is that you cannot look at the human being in just one narrow aspect. The human being is not just a machine made of neurotransmitters and chemicals. That's just not what we are. That is one aspect, but it is not the entirety of the human being. And so if you want to answer the question of suffering, you cannot only look at one aspect, which is what is happening is that depending who you're speaking to, or depending who you're following on Instagram, or whoever is making the content, they might just look at one aspect. If you go to someone else, maybe someone who only focuses on mindset. It's all mindset, right? They might say that you're suffering from depression because you need to change your mindset. And while that is absolutely valid, again, that's only one aspect. If you go to a dietitian, they might tell you it's your diet. You're suffering from depression because of your diet. And that's also valid, because diet has an impact on our mental health, for sure. In fact, they say that mental health, a lot of it has to do with the gut, like the health of the gut. Your serotonin and all these, it's actually in the gut. Your immunity. So that would be one aspect. But then if you go to, for example, a sheikh, they might say, sister, brother, you're depressed because you don't have enough iman, or you don't have enough sabr, or maybe you're depressed because you are not reading enough Quran. Now, while that is valid as a very important part of our overall mental, emotional, spiritual health, again, it's not the whole picture. There are pieces that we have missed in this picture. And one of the biggest pieces that I think today we have missed is the piece of trauma. Trauma. This is probably the biggest, not just within the Muslim community, but even within the psychological community. We are coming back to that, where at one point, I remember when I was studying psychology, long time ago, decades ago, at UW, and so much of the abnormal psychology was about, neurotransmitters. There's not enough dopamine, or there's not enough serotonin, and it was very chemical. It was very, biological. Now, they are starting to understand that even these what they used to call illnesses, things like depression and anxiety and panic attacks and personality disorders, are actually stemming from trauma. And that's the piece that the psychological community is starting to understand. But as a Muslim community, as a religious community, this is the most, I'd say the most significant missing piece, is what happened in our childhood. And the question of suffering cannot be discussed without talking about that. And for too long, we have been discussing it without talking about that. And that is missing a giant piece, because you cannot tell a person. Now, I'm going to give you guys an example, right? The way I break it down when I'm talking about suffering is just to simplify it. I want you to imagine that you're in a house and you're asleep. It's like the middle of the night and you're sleeping. And you wake up to your fire alarm blaring. So at that point, you have one of two choices, right? You can, you're really tired. You don't want to listen to this fire alarm anymore. So you can go and you can just take out the batteries. Right? What have you solved? Well, you've solved the noise problem.
There might be a fire.
Well, exactly. But what you've done, thank you. What you've done in that moment is you've given yourself temporary relief. Everyone with me? You've given yourself temporary relief from the annoyance of that noise, the anxiety that it's causing you, and now you can go back to sleep for a bit. But as you rightly said, your house is still burning down because there might be a fire. Now, the way I want you guys to think about it is the pain that we experience in life is the fire alarm. So just first understand that concept. The pain we experience is the fire alarm. In other words, that alarm will come in the form of depression. The alarm will come in the form of anxiety. The alarm will come in the form of panic attacks, trust issues. All of these things are the alarm. Is that fire alarm comfortable? Does it make you comfortable? Does it relax you? Is it like a lullaby? No. It's actually very, very disturbing. It's a very loud, very unsettling sound. It makes us uncomfortable on purpose. Pain makes us uncomfortable on purpose. What is the purpose of this uncomfortable alarm? What are we meant to do? It's meant to wake us up if we're sleeping. It's meant to shake us up if we're distracted. And it's meant to force us to take action. Understand? The alarm is forcing us, like if you're in the depths of sleep, it's designed to wake you up. And it's designed to push you to action and presumably do what? Look for the source of the fire, right? But what happens if I just take out the batteries? Do you know what that is? That is the things that we do to numb our pain. That are the things those are the things we do to escape the anxiety, the depression, the Band-Aid solutions. And everybody has them. Coping mechanisms. Everyone has coping mechanisms because we needed coping mechanisms to survive growing up. And so these coping mechanisms, they're called trauma responses sometimes. But what they are their ways to take out the batteries because I hate the sound of that alarm. And I would rather be comfortable. I would rather go back to sleep. But I'm not addressing the source, which is the fire. And so what happens in our life is that when we experience pain, in whatever form that is, we're all going to experience pain at some level, but it is meant to be an alarm. Is everyone following? Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you have a heart condition, how do you know? What's your first alarm? Chest pain. Yeah? Chest pain. If you have an infection in your tooth, what's the alarm? Pain, tooth pain. If you have an infection in your body, what is the alarm? Pain, fever. So this is the design of Allah. Now, when I feel that chest pain, or I feel that tooth pain, or I feel that, that the pain in my leg because of the infection, I could just take a lot of Tylenol, right? I could take a lot of Advil and ibuprofen and I can numb the pain. All right, I don't have to feel the chest pain for now. But have I addressed the issue? No. I still have the infection in my tooth or in my leg, or I still have the heart condition. And so what happens is that with our coping mechanisms, a lot of times they are just numbing mechanisms. They are ways to pop a Tylenol or an ibuprofen so that I don't have to, they're ways to take out the batteries. How many of you have remember the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand? So I actually taught Healing the Emptiness in Christchurch, and 3 of the widows came to my class. Widows, their husbands went to Jum'ah and did not come home. They were slaughtered. And I spoke to these women, and something they said to me, because it had been a few years after, right? Something they said to me is that, you know, for us, the way that we take out the batteries is we stay very, very busy. We have to stay very, very busy. And I think that this isn't even something we realize, but that is actually sometimes a way to just avoid dealing with the issue. Just stay busy. And there are other mechanisms that we use, right? People go to drugs, people go to alcohol. Addictions are, by the way, this is what is at the root of addictions. Taking out the batteries from our pain. It's numbing the pain. It's hiding from the pain. But not addressing the fire, right? Not addressing what is the actual root cause. In our community, a lot of times, if your house is on fire and your alarm is going off, sometimes it's because there's abuse in the home. Sometimes it's because there's, a toxic environment in the home or in the relationship. And a lot of times the advice that so many people are given is, have sabr, stay in the burning house, and keep your children in the burning house for the sake of your children. That's the advice. Brilliant, isn't it? Have sabr. And what does this mean? It means go back, stay, let the fires continue, keep your children in the fires for their sake. So you can understand how that makes no sense. Because if your house is on fire, meaning that there is abuse, what are you supposed to do? Anyone? What? Flee. Okay, that's a good objective. That's a good option. What can we try to do before running away? Put out the fire. You know, I always like asking audiences question. What do you do if your house is on fire? And like, you'll hear someone scream out, run! And I was like, I appreciate that. But let's try to save the home first, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to call the fire department. We're going to get help. Yes? Is this rocket science? Yeah, right? We're going to call the fire department. we're going to get a fire extinguisher. Everyone with me? I'm not saying anything weird, right? We're going to try to stop the fire first to save the home. And that's the point. Is we trying to save the home first? It is only if the fire continues. Now the question is what? I tried to stop the fire. I took action to stop the fire because that is my duty. Because I will be asked about my children in that burning home. I will be asked by Allah. And if I keep my children in a burning house, then that is what? That's on me, right? That I didn't do something to stop it or leave it, right? And so the question is, if that fire continues, I tried, I called the fire department, I got the fire extinguisher, I got the fire blanket, and it still continues. Now what do? Run, don't walk out of the burning house. And this is the type of rocket science that we have to keep repeating. Because for too long, the narrative is have sabr, stay in the burning house, and keep your children in the burning house for the sake of your children. Complete nonsensical and actually oppressive advice. The idea is this. The idea is we first have to remember we're not put on this earth to suffer. Because if I believe that I was put on this earth to suffer, I am going to be like, well, you know what? This life is suffering, so I'll burn. I just have to burn. This is how it's supposed to be. One other thing I'll add, and then inshallah I'll open it for questions. One other thing I'll add is this. This is where it gets deep, okay? The type of house we grew up in is going to affect the type of house we stay in. Got that? So the type of home that we grew up in becomes the blueprint for what's normal for us. And therefore, that's the type of house we continue to live in. This is why growing up in a house that's on fire is so dangerous, because what happens is one of two outcomes happens when you grow up in a house that's on fire. Everybody understanding what I'm saying? This is an abusive home. Yeah, this is a toxic abusive home. One of two things will happen when you grow up in a home that is on fire. You either grow up to be an abuser or you grow up to marry an abuser. By and large. Those are the two outcomes by and large. You either become the abuser or you marry the abuser. Why do we do that? Why are human beings like that? The reason is that the nervous system prefers a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. Everybody got that? We will prefer the hell we are used to the heaven we are not used to. So what's the solution, Yasmin? Two things. First, we have to stop fires or get out of fires. That's step one. That's number one. We have to try to stop fires or remove ourselves and our children from fires. Got that? That's step one. But step two, and this is equally important, we have to heal the wounds that came from the fires in our childhood. Do you know why? Because when you don't heal them, you repeat them. You pass them on. Because you're going to set up a home that's just like the home you had growing up. This is not a coincidence. This is the way the human being is. This is the psychology of the human being. We want what's familiar, even if it was hell. And that's why people end up marrying abusive spouses when their parent was abusive. One of the phenomenons you're going to learn, which is very, very scary in some cases, is that, and I always remind women this, to be very mindful who you marry, who you stay married to, because it must be who you want your son to become, because he will. Got that? Sons become their fathers. Boys become their fathers. And I have yet to have someone challenge that statement. Boys become their fathers unless there is intervention. What's intervention? Intervention is either removal from the abuse or a lot of therapy. Got it? But the way it works is that boys become their fathers. The level of modeling is so profound, it's unbelievable. And that's the design. The father is the example for the son in such almost a frightening way that boys will become their fathers. Women, interestingly enough, also model their mothers in some ways. But oftentimes, like whenever I meet a woman who's maybe in a very, very toxic situation, her house is on fire, and she's not taking action, either to stop the fire or leave the fire. Most of the time, she watched her mother do the same thing. Got it? She watched her mother do the very same thing, and she is modeling her mother. So, as women, a lot of times we might neglect ourselves. You know, self-abandonment is a big issue, right? But one of the things that I feel like I have to tell women, because this is like, if nothing else motivates them, it's this. It's, what do you want to model for your children? Even if you don't care about yourself. Even if you think, I'm going to burn, I have sabr, I can hold, I can drink the poison, this is what I've been taught to do, this is what a woman must do. What do you want to model for your children? Because you are setting the example for your daughters as mothers, and your husband is setting the example for your sons. And they follow. And that's how generational trauma continues, by the way. is this is how it works until somebody breaks the cycle. And how do you break the cycle? You stop the fire, you get out of the fire, and you heal the wounds from the fire. That's the only way to break the cycle. Otherwise, it just continues. And by the way, and I'll just add this, most of it is unconscious. This is not conscious. We're not consciously, hey, I want to marry you because you're abusive like my dad. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. You don't look at them and say, oh, you seem like just like the same type of person like my terrible father. I'm going to marry you. It's unconscious. But that's how it works. And the deep reason for that is we are looking for resolution. Inside, we're looking to heal, and it's like unconscious. It's like, I want to change the ending of this story because it didn't start out good. And so I need a character that's like the one who caused the problem. And it's unconscious. And this is something we have to become conscious of because otherwise we pass it on. So the question we have to ask is, what example do we want to set for our children? And now I'm going to end with this, inshallah, because I do want to have a discussion. And that is, I talk about finding the source of the fire as 4 different parts, if you imagine, in the house. There are 4 different parts of your life that you have to examine for the source of the suffering. Everybody with me? So there are 4. The first part is the biology, is the biological. This has to do with our diet, our sleep, our exercise. Is there something biologically that could be causing the suffering? There are biological reasons why we might be having depression or anxiety, or if you don't sleep properly, you're gonna see a lot of different types of symptoms. Your diet has an effect, so your biology has a big effect. How you take care of your body is going to affect your mental and spiritual health. That's a fact, right? But that's only one part. That's only one part. That's only one room. You can't say, I checked the kitchen, no fire. Okay, I'm going to go back to sleep. The fire might be in the living room, right? What's the second part of your life you have to check? You have to check the environment that you're in. I don't need to tell you that if your house is on fire, no matter how much Quran you read, no matter how much you pray, no matter how much you fast, you're going to burn. Everybody with me? Like, you can't tell someone, yeah, sister, go back to the burning house, just read more Quran. Yes? Quran is very powerful, but you're still going to burn if your house is on fire. Your skin's going to burn. And this is the problem, is we don't address the importance of the environment. We try to bypass everything. It's called spiritual bypassing. We use religion and spirituality to bypass the fact that your house is on fire. Yeah, we can't do that. We can't say, go back to the burning house, but just pray more. Yeah, pray more, but you have to address the burning house. Does everyone understand that concept? And I'll give you an example from the Seerah. In Mecca, at the time of the Prophet, ﷺ, in Mecca, why did Allah have the Prophet ﷺ and the companions leave Mecca and migrate to Medina? Why did they leave Mecca and migrate to Medina? They had more sabr than us. They had more tawakkul than us, more iman than us. They had Quran, they had salah, they had everything. Why leave Mecca? Why not stay? Well, because it was abusive. Got it? Like, Mecca was an abusive environment. That is why they left. Makes sense? And they left Mecca to go to a healthier environment where they could flourish better in Medina. Even though they had all the spiritual tools, more than we do, but they still also needed a healthier environment. Because your environment matters. It matters a lot. Who you take as your friends matters a lot. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mar'u ala dini khalili," that a person will be on the deen of their closest companion, the way of life, the religion of their closest companion. So it's very important who we take in our close circle, right? We become like them. So that's two. Biology, the biological, the environment. Make sure the environment is not on fire, okay? Make sure that the body is not on fire. Make sure that the diet and how you take care of your body is not on fire. Make sure the environment is not on fire. Number three is the psychological, the mental health. What does this mean? Well, this is a big conversation. I talk about it in the book, but it's a big conversation about a combination of healing from childhood trauma. That's a big part of this one. A lot of people are suffering today because of things that happened 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago in their childhood. I'll tell you guys something wild that blew my mind when I heard this. They looked at soldiers coming out of war. And they looked at which ones had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and which did not. And you know what they found? They found that the soldiers who came out, who had PTSD, came from unhealthy childhoods. And the soldiers experienced the same trauma, right? The same traumatic event, war, who came out did not have the same symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, came from healthy childhoods. Understand? And they found this even to be the case with Holocaust survivors. Something that traumatic did not affect them the same, depending on their childhood. That's why it is so important when we talk about overall health that we are also talking about addressing the childhood wounds. Because when you don't address them, they actually control your life and you won't even know it. It's called unconscious programming. And it leads our life, by the way. Something like 95%, one neuroscientist said, is actually driven by unconscious programming of our behavior. We are not rational beings. We know we think we are, right? But the reality is we kick into unconscious programming the vast majority of the time. Do you know when this was programmed? This is scary. Do you want to know when this stuff was programmed? Before the age of 6. Do you understand? Like your children, their programming is happening in the first few years of their life. Your programming happened in the first few years of your life. And that is the programming you are living off of. Don't think that you're all rational. We aren't even in our prefrontal cortex half the time. We don't even use this. No, but that's neuroscience. We don't use this. Anytime you're stressed, this goes offline. So basically, you're saying all the time, Yasmin. Do you understand? Every time you're stressed. When are we not stressed? Every time you're stressed, you're not even you don't even have access to your prefrontal cortex. Do you know what that means? It means you're using unconscious programming. It means you're using your survival strategies that you learned when you were 3. Do you know what that is? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. One of those 4. Do you know what those mean? Fight, obviously, that's aggressing, right? Like flight, escaping, sometimes escaping into your head, overthinking, that's flight, overthinking, rumination, right? Anxiety. Freeze is like when you just shut down. And fawn, this is one of our favorites as women, people pleasing, right? You try, your strategy for survival is just appease and please no matter what the person in front of you, even if that means hurting yourself. Okay, these are survival strategies. These are not prefrontal cortex. These are just unconscious programming. How do we break out of that? We have to actually become conscious and heal that because it happened a long time ago, all of this programming in our nervous system. and it's leading our lives. It's dictating how we parent. You know, if there's anyone who is going to trigger you, it's going to be two people in your life: your children and your spouse.
What about parents? I thought it was really
Yeah, parents, but they're not as much around, right? Well, great.
Sorry, everybody.
She's, I don't have either to trigger me. Well, just wait. Just wait, Sister Fred. just wait. The way I describe it is like going into marriage. So imagine everybody has like all these sort of hidden wounds from their childhood, right? Different types, different sizes, shapes and sizes. Because obviously it's not Jannah, guys, right? But let's add to that, we have a lot of generational trauma in our community, like extra. Okay, so our parents came from trauma. A lot of them came from war. A lot of them came from poverty. A lot of them came as refugees. Like we have a lot, an unbelievable amount, which are also other factors affect that, yeah? But imagine we have all these hidden like sort of wounds. They're covered up. When you enter marriage, it's like entering a giant X-ray machine. What does it do? It gets to show you all the hidden wounds, right? And then you have children, and their job is to jump in the wounds. And to dig into the wounds, because they will trigger you. They will trigger everything from your childhood. Because what are they going to do? You know what they're going to do? They're going to behave in a way that you behaved as a child, and then you're going to be triggered to behave exactly how your parents behaved. And this is why, I'll just tell you one thing. You know how when you get mad, sometimes when you get mad, you will start to even change the language, right? You all of a sudden, you just sound like your parents. Even if you're speaking English, all of a sudden it becomes the language of your parents. Because you're no longer in your prefrontal cortex, you're in programming now. You've gone into unconscious programming as soon as you get stressed. This is why the absolute most important thing they're saying now about mental health is one thing: regulating your nervous system. It's being able to handle stress. Deep breaths, that helps, yes. It's being able to handle stress. It's being able to handle stress. Because if you cannot handle stress, you're never going to be able to even access your higher thinking. You're not going to be able to be rational. You're not going to be able to have self-control. All of those things are in the prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain is where you have self-control, self-regulation, emotional regulation, moral thinking, rational thinking. You can't access any of that when you're triggered, or when you're in fight or flight, or when you're stressed. So that's why you have to be able to calm your nervous system down enough to get your prefrontal cortex back online. And that's essentially what is the essence of mental health right now, like that they know. And so as parents, that's even more important, because our children are going to trigger us a lot. And the most important thing that we have to be able to do is to calm our own nervous system so that we can respond from here rather than react from here. Unconscious programming, fight or flight, survival brain. Most of us just live in our survival brain. So, okay, so I will inshallah open to okay, subhanakallah wa bihamdaka ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik wal 'asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr.